Hello and welcome to
Absolute Game Off.
Nerd! I'm JP and he's Rohan, wherever he's at, and we are your non-geek, non-nerd host. I've done that like 7 times.
I was just saying, I think people are going to think that that's just your thing, and you've never gotten it right.
He's over here, but we have a special guest with us today. We have Jame from Dragon Ink Comics. She's somewhere down here. Rohan, if you can give a better introduction, please.
So again, we have with us tonight Jame from Dragon Ink Comics. I found Jame's channel because she did a what do you call it? A kind of a roast of all the comic YouTubers, and I loved it, and I thought it was great. And so then at that exact moment is when I reached out to her. I was like, "We got to have you on." She didn't roast us. I don't think we're big enough, JP, but she did get to Mike. She did get Mike from Lunch Money, who's a good buddy of ours. I think in your part 2 is when you got to Mike, if I remember correctly. But she had most of the big boys. And I also know because I ended up starting a debate because I disagreed with her on one of her points regarding FF5 and Batman 3. But anyway, so we have Jame with us from Dragon Ink Comics. Jame, say hello. How are you doing today?
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for coming on. So, Jame, I think you said you've watched a few episodes. You know, we always start with the same question, which is, what is your origin story when it comes to comics? Take us way back. How did it all start?
Oh, yeah, I'll jump into that. So I will also note I had to take down those roasting videos because I got a lot of hate.
Oh, really? People are too sensitive these days.
Yeah. I was kind of worried. And I'll be honest, I feel like I went a little too risque with a few people. A little too, even though it's a roast, you have to be sensitive about people. So going forward, if I do another one, I'm going to get everyone's permission who wants to be roasted. Because I had people that volunteered themselves. And I'm totally cool with roasting people as long as they're okay with it. So
yeah, I don't speak for JP, but you are more than welcome to roast me. I would love to see it.
I have a horrible. You riled me up easily, Rohan. You could imagine if I got roasted, how that
would be. Yeah, I can give you some dirt on JP. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think it, and I've seen some of the Comedy Central roasts. I mean, but the people right there, they get right into it. So, yeah. I mean, they got to have thick skin for that. So, I mean, if you tell them ahead of time, and they say okay, then it's all games on. But
yeah, I take it
too seriously. We are
exactly
YouTubers about comic books, for Christ's sake.
Yeah, exactly. It's all in good fun. We're talking about comic books. Like, it's all good. Yeah.
Needless to say, a few people got pretty butthurt and won't talk to me anymore. So I'm trying to be sensitive going forward. It is.
No, I get it. I get it from your perspective. I totally get it from your perspective.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah, tell us about your origin story. How did you get into comics and loving comics?
So there's actually, I'd say, 2 origin stories, and it's not really a retcon. What it is I feel like there's the origin story for me reading comics and getting into comics, and then my origin story for like collecting comics. And I think they're a little distinct. So what got me into like reading comics was TMNT, the cartoon. And I remember seeing that cartoon, and I, like a lot of kids, like from the 80s, I freaking love that stuff. Like I probably saw every episode more than once. And a friend of mine had a TMNT comic. And if any of you have actually seen one of the old TMNT comics, they're kind of risky, risque. In terms of they're really violent, there's like a lot of cleavage being shown, they're definitely independent, right?
Yeah.
There's no code associated with them. And, when I was reading, I was like, oh man, this is like, it was almost like looking at a porno when you're a kid. You're like, oh my gosh, what am I looking at? Like, this is so cool. So I was hooked, and that was my into comics. And I had convinced my mom, like, oh, can we go to the comic shop? I want some back issues, right? And I think TMNT at that time.
Can you give us an age range here?
So I was born in 81.
Okay, so you're about same as us then. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so I think I was watching in the early 90s, or no, late 80s, early 90s. So I don't know where the show was at that point. But the actual comic series had been out since 84, right? And was about to end. I think the actual comic book ended around 90 or 91. And so I was wanting back issues. And back then they were pretty cheap, right? So that's when I first went to a comic shop. And there was a comic shop in Santa Rosa called Fantasy Books and Games. And I remember walking in and there was that smell, that comic book smell. And it was the first time I ever smelled it. And it just hit me. I was just like, wow, I love this. And so I found my back issues and stuff and, really got into reading, mostly independent stuff. And
wait, real quick, did you hide the TMNT from your mom after when she like picked you up or anything?
No, well, she thought that it was just like the kid show, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I didn't really feel like I had to hide it because she didn't really look at it and didn't ask to look at it. But I, I'm sure at the time it probably crossed my mind, looking at it. But it was mostly the violence that I thought was so different than the cartoon, right? Like in the original comic, the foot soldiers are people, right? They're not like robots, so like there's like people being killed, right? So it was totally different. So I got really into that. But then there was the Wall, and that's when I first saw like an X-Men #1, and the X-Men cartoon was out around that time too. And I remember seeing that X-Men #1, I'm thinking like, wow, wouldn't it be cool to own that? And it was probably like a 2.0, and I think at the time it was like $500, right? So, but I thought, wow, that's neat. And it was around that time that I also got a Wizard magazine, which all of us used to get, like
Wizard. Yeah, I loved it.
And I actually submitted for that. You know how you could do art and send it in?
Yep.
I did some really bad art. I don't even remember like what character. I think it was an X-Men character though. Anyways, they had a price guide. And I looked at the price guide, but if you guys remember in the original Wizard, the prices only went back a certain like distance. Like it wasn't like an overstreet, right? Like it was like they would show like X-Men up to like issue 204 or something. And so
I think they were kind of like Key Collector, where they had like the key books essentially, right?
So yeah, and they were pretty modern. So I was like, what are these other books and how much are they worth, right? So I ended up learning about a collection that was for sale around that time called the IRS collection. And it was a collection that was seized as part of like an IRS seizure, right? And so there was a catalog, and like a lot of like comic shops back then that dealt in like Golden Age and Silver Age, you could get this catalog. And that was the first time I saw like Golden Age comics. And the first time I'm like, I need to get an Overstreet price guide. So I bought an Overstreet, and that really got me into the idea of like, wow, these things are actually worth a lot of money. Like there's just like potentially money to be made. And so as I was reading more comics, I also was getting into the idea of like, wow, maybe I should invest in comics, which was pretty funny because I was like 13, 12 or 13, thinking about this. And so I got my Overstreet. I had this catalog for the IRS collection, and I was trying to pick a book because I convinced my grandparents to let them use my savings to buy a comic as an investment. And what I ended up deciding to buy, which was a Bullet Man #2, which, looking back, that was like the stupidest thing to buy, right? Like why Bullet Man #2? But that's what I bought. And it was like a very fine. So it was like higher grade, but I didn't even see it. You know what I mean? I didn't even see the cover. It was just like a book in a catalog that was associated with a value that I saw in the CGC guide. So like my first jump into Golden Age was not smart. It was just kind of like, I want to get into this. This seems really cool. It looks like this will be worth something. But like a lot of new collectors, I didn't know what I was doing. And
that was the Bullet Man was that was the Golden Age you bought, the Bullet Man?
Yeah, it was like a 1942. And but it was, I remember when I got it, I was so impressed, right? Like it was a McRae cover, who ended up being one of my favorite Golden Age artists. And it wasn't a bad cover. It was like Bullet Man and Bullet Girl on there. But when you think about like the things most people are looking for in a book, like is it a #1? Is it a first appearance? Is it like a classic cover? It had none of those things going for it. You know, it was a typical number 2 book. But what ended up happening then is I got the Gerber guides and what were they called? Those big picture books that had all the golden age picture. I'm blanking on it right now.
Yeah, I know which one you're talking about.
Real quick, can we pause? Was the term golden age a term in that time frame? Like, because when I was a kid growing up in the 90s, like I never knew golden age, silver. Like I knew I knew like there was Action 1 was first Superman. I knew of, Detective 27 was first Batman, but I didn't know that was golden age. Is that a term that was used then, or is that a newer term that we've adopted since?
I think it was a term that was used because, even back in 92, like I feel like the Overstreet price cut, I actually have one laying around somewhere. There was still like market reports in there. And I still think there was a golden age market report. And I think that even then they were separating it based on pre-code, then sort of atomic age, which now that's more of a modern thing, this atomic age. It used to be golden age and then silver.
Yeah, okay.
And then right into bronze. I think the one that has continued to expand is the modern age, right?
Yeah.
I feel like even back then there was this idea of the Bronze Age and the Copper Age, but those have continued to be redefined.
They should do a something for the modern age because you got almost 25 years worth of comics.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean almost 30 years at this point.
Yeah, I mean, does Copper go to 2000 or does it go to 95?
I always think Copper is to early 90s. Again, I'm not 100% sure. So when I think of modern, it's kind of 90s and up is what I think of, but I definitely think there should be 90s to I don't know, early 2000s should be something. And then from there, modern should just be what is modern at the time, like the current decade.
5 years tops.
Yeah.
But then you got to come up with funny names for everything. You already used gold and silver and bronze, copper. What's the next to use? Pewter?
I don't know. Nickel. Yeah, exactly.
Pewter. I don't know.
The nickel age.
Yeah, the nickel age and the steel age.
I just prefer music's easier. Music, you got the 80s, the 90s. They're very distinct. Yeah. So why we just can't have 70s comics, 50s comics?
You could also delineate you could say the internet, the coming of the internet age or something like that. I don't know. You could come up with something. I'm just saying it would help.
Say post or what? AOL or post AOL.
Yeah, post dial-up, pre-dial-up, something like that. Yeah.
Anyone with an AOL.com web or email address, is old.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Anyways, continue, Jamie.
So but it's true. Like some of the ages, especially the modern age, what does that even mean nowadays?
Yeah.
Right? It's everything is lumped in there. One thing I feel really defines the 90s is the rise of what I consider large third-party publishers like Image and publishers like that, which you didn't quite see. Before then, even Mirage, which is where TMNT came out, was fairly small press,
Eclipse,
I think at their top they're producing 50,000 issues,
Yeah.
So but what I ended up doing, I ended up getting those picture guides, right? Because I was really intrigued by what do these comics look like? And Overstreet guides, when I got the first one, they had that section in the back that showed some of the pictures of Golden Age comics. And I was just blown away. It's like I fell in love when I started seeing those Golden Age covers. And I had no interest in reading them, which is different than my, hobby of reading TMNT. I just wanted to collect them. There was something about the art that just struck me. And a lot of people that are early in collecting, at that time, I was really into pre-code horror too, Weird Mysteries 5, EC Tales from the Crypt. That stuff blew my mind. And also having seen the HBO, Tales from the Crypt show, I was how could they be making this stuff for kids in the 50s? And the stories are actually that brutal, you know what I mean? These kids are reading these horrific stories, and that kind of blew my mind too. I was wow, I really love to own some of these. And so I started buying Golden Age right around the time eBay came out. And it used to there was not a lot of comics on eBay. And I remember if you went to the pre-code horror area, there was maybe 200 listings max. You could go through every listing in 20 minutes. You know, it's not like today where there's like thousands of listings for comics. Like you could go through every Golden Age book on eBay in under an hour and have a good idea of like what you wanted and what you didn't. So it was then I started getting into covers and what I liked and what you know, if it was really horrific, for example, I liked it. I got really into weird stuff like Blue Beetle from the Golden Age. What else?
Did you get that mirror cover?
That you talking about the Good Girl cover, JP?
Yeah, where the girl is in the mirror. You can't. She has a bra, but on
the back, there's no bra strap.
There's no bra. Do you know which one I'm talking about?
What title
Blue
is
Beetle.
that?
It's Blue Beetle.
Is that the Cayman cover?
I think so.
it's
She's
like
looking in the mirror, and he's in the window. And
she's like taking off her shirt, right? And then in the mirror, you can see her bra, but on the back, it looks like she's topless.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a cool cover. I did not own that one, but I really liked the Cayman art. So that particular artist did like the last 10 issues of Blue Beetle. And the Blue Beetle, the art was really crappy. You know what I mean? It's like some of those Fox titles, it was like it was like the artist of the week, right? Like whatever inter they had was doing the covers. And then they brought in this Cayman, this artist Cayman, and the covers for those last 10 issues are like will blow your mind, right? They're really cool. And yeah, they were doing Good Girl art. But yes, I did not own those. Those were even then a little more pricey than some of the other issues. But that's when I got into like Lou Fine, who was a really kind of a big Fox artist back then. I got into what was his name?
Lou Fine is it Fantastic Comics?
Yeah, so Lou Fine did Fantastic. That was Samson.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
The first appearance of Samson. Some beautiful covers on those too. Those early ones, like Science Comics. So I got in, just like I was into weird comics when I was reading them, I got into weird comics in the Golden Age. And like even oddball titles like Catman. Like there was this Hitler strangulation cover. I don't know if any of you have seen it, but it is like the coolest cover. It's Catman literally up close strangling Hitler. And I thought, this is the coolest thing. I have to own this. And so I started buying comics that I liked the covers and that I thought were really unique. And that's what I really built my first collection, my first Golden Age collection from was that. But it had nothing to do with reading the books. You know, it was more of like I had this investment mindset, but I also just bought them because I liked them.
Do you still have that original collection of yours?
No. So I sold my whole collection, kind of like you guys. I think you guys got back into the hobby just a few years ago, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's now coming up on 2 years, yeah.
Yep. So I got back in about 4 years ago, earnestly. So I sold my collection when I went to college. You know, I was facing student loans and stuff, and I was like, well, I might as well just sell these assets that I have. And I regret it. Like, I had some really cool books. Like, I had a Mystery Men #1, which was the first appearance of the Blue Beetle, which you just don't see them for sale. It's like one of the earliest Fox titles. They just don't come up. That Catman comic, I have not been able to get another one of those. I had a Weird Mysteries 5, which is that monkey brain cover. Couldn't get that one back. But I've been able to get back most of the books that I really cared about and that I wanted when I was younger, which has been pretty awesome because there's no way I would have been able to afford them back then.
Got it. So then so now taking it to today, is your interest then just further expanding this Golden Age collection, or where do you see yourself kind of in this space?
Well, before you, real quick, I was looking at your IG page, and I noticed like what I like about your page, you're collecting similar to mine, where you have those Golden Age and then you have the modern stuff that like they don't really match up, but they do. I understand it in my head, right? Like there's covers, there's like that makes sense to me, but like Rohan's big on his first appearances. He's very specific. I'll say, you know, am I correct in that assumption?
Yeah, absolutely.
Whereas I'm kind of all over the board, and I'm not saying you are, but I could see just some differential collecting habits. So I think that's kind of cool.
Thanks.
You know, like one post is a golden age that you don't see very often. Then you got, TMNT and, things like that. So I think that's kind of neat.
I definitely collect what I like. I every time I've not collected what I like when I start to speculate, I always screw myself. I'll just say that. It's like I start getting stuff I don't really care about, and it's
It doesn't last.
Yeah, it doesn't last. And but I get it. What I love about this hobby is that there truly is no wrong way to collect if you are buying what you like and you're doing it earnestly. I think those that are in the hobby just for speculation, I just don't feel like it's super satisfying. I don't feel like that you're going to be able to maintain it. Like even after I sold my collection, there were books that in my dreams I wanted still. Even during those many years of not collecting, I was like, I would still love to own that.
I don't think I ever thought about collecting them again throughout that time. It wasn't until I still had my short box, and we watched the movies when they came out, but I didn't I wish I'd have thought in my head to go buy Amazing Fantasy 15 or X-Men 1, because I started working back in early 2000. I could have, probably put some money towards that, but because I like to not speculate, but at least buy them for the growth factor.
Yep.
And I just never thought about it until 2 years ago. So I wish I would have.
Yeah, I feel like with Silver Age especially, there was this time when you could have really got into Silver Age, maybe 10 or so years ago, maybe a little bit before then. You could have got in cheap. Like I remember when Amazing Fantasy 15s were selling for $4,000 to $5,000 in 2.0.
Yeah, we actually coincidentally talked about this last week with our guest Bruce. So JP and I, our very first interview was with this guy named Errol, and Errol's big goal was to build up to buy Superman 1. And he's been collecting for decades, kind of thing. And so in the early 2000s, he that's exactly what he did. He's like, Spider-Man is huge. This book is going to see huge growth. And he was buying AF-15s for $1,500. And so if you look on his Instagram, he's got this photo where he's got 7 AF-15s laid out on his bed. He used those to trade up to a 7.0, sold the 7.0, and that gave him the money to buy his Superman 1.
Wow.
So yeah, it's exactly what you're talking about.
Here's the thing. If you go back to the 90s, let's say, something I've been trying to contemplate in my head. If you had $1,000 in the 90s to buy a comic, all right, what would it have been back then? Right. And we didn't have graded comics. So you could say I would have bought X-Men 1 for $500. And then let's say what else might have been that price? Hulk 181 might have been $300.
Yeah, right? I do remember as a kid now, one of the things I used to love doing with Wizard magazines and the comic book price guide, as I did like to look up like the big old time books. Like the two I always remember is I always remember looking up Action Comics 1 because it was like the first comic that crossed the $100,000 mark when I was a kid. And then the other one I always looked at was Fantastic Four #1, and that just broke 10,000. So that would have been like 1992, 93, somewhere in that range.
I don't remember a break. I mean, I'm not saying you're right or wrong, but I don't remember them being as popular in the 90s, but like I know that book was not cheap back then. I don't know how much it was, but I just wonder if you would have put $1,000 into something, 1 or 2, 3 books, what would it be worth today? And if you'd have put it in Apple stock back in the 90s or Microsoft, where would have you been better off at? I'm just kind of
curious. Stock guy,
really JP. A lot of money.
JP, you're the stock guy. You should do the analysis.
I know that the answer is because I have that exact example, but I'm just saying, like, I think about what could have been had we known, right? We knew this was you didn't know Apple, Microsoft were going to grow to this magnitude. We didn't know that, Action Comics was going to be $3.5 million now.
I mean, the 8.5 is already out over 4 million. That's going to break records here when it finishes.
But you couldn't have bought that for $1,000, but you could have bought it for maybe 10, right?
No. I mean, I think
100. You said 100.
100, yeah, is what I said then. But yes, I mean, like that scenario though is realistic. Like, what could you use the money for to buy that would be exponentially bigger now. But yeah, I mean, going back. So my question was, so where do you find yourself collecting, and do you still read as well now?
So I am collecting very specific issues. I kind of went insane like everyone else during the comic boom and just kind of bought all over the place. Now, most of the stuff I bought I liked, but I also did some speculation that I really lost my butt on. Like, I don't know if any of you have seen some of my old videos on like Marvel Family #1s, but I own like 7 Marvel Family #1s, ranging from 3.0 to 7.0. And as you guys know, the value of that comic has crashed. So like books that were worth like $20,000 are probably worth like 5 right now.
I mean,
And
I find
sitting on these things.
it's so funny, like how big speculation got. Like I remember, like a big one was like when the She-Hulk show was coming out, and people were like, oh, Secret Wars, is it 3 or is it? Yeah, Secret Wars 3, first Titania, and like that was #1 in the hot. It's just like Titania. Come on, like what are we doing here, right?
Yeah, so like, yeah, I went crazy. So I bought all kinds of stuff, and like a lot of people, I'm kind of scaling back. I'm trying to like clean up the collection a little bit, but I don't want to lose too much money. You know what I mean? If I can break even on stuff, I'm willing to do it. But a lot of stuff I'm just having to put aside. I'm fortunate I didn't buy a lot of it on debt. So, I know a lot of collectors that are in a really tough position right now because they were really hoping that this boom would continue. And now a lot of them are just like, they're fire sailing their collections. And I feel really bad for that. But I'm kind of in like a top 10 mindset now when it comes to collecting. Like I produce a top 10 list that I post on my channel every year. And it's really those books that I'm focusing on.
So when you say that, that's 10 books you're focusing on in that year, or are you saying you're going to whittle your collection down to just 10 books and it's always going to get curated to 10?
No, there's 10 books that I'm like really focusing on like acquiring. And
yeah, okay.
I have like, again, because I was speculating, I have a bunch of duplicates of stuff I need to get rid of, but there are certain books that I just feel like I can never get rid of. Like I have an Adventure 40, which is the first Sandman cover, right?
Mm-hmm.
First conceived story, one of the top 20 Golden Age comics. And like that book, there's like 22 of them known to exist, and it's, or something like that. And it's a universal grade. Like, how can I sell that, right? It's like such a core piece of the collection.
I mean, that seems to fit what you want though too. So why would you sell it?
Yeah, I wouldn't. So these are the kind of books that I'm really looking for. It's like, there's I'm Golden Age DC superheroes, especially the oddball ones, like the Justice Society members are the ones that I like. I'm not a big Batman collector or Superman collector, although like anyone else, I'd love to have those titles. But like oddball characters like Hourman, Starman, Spectre, things like that. Like I love these characters. And it's actually what I continued to read in the 90s. So like I picked up the Jeff Johns JSA series. I've been more of a DC collector once I got out of Independence. So I've kind of continued with some of those stories. And even right now they're doing some JSA stuff again that I've been taking a look at. But I haven't been reading a lot, mostly just whittling the collection, making funny videos about other YouTubers, trying to stay out of trouble, you know what I mean? Which I don't know, always seems close behind me.
Can I just ask? I mean, you mentioned Adventure 20, which is, you said, a top 20 Golden Age book. I mean, I'm just now curious, like what other heavy hitters are we talking about here?
Okay. So it's an Adventure 40, first Sandman, and then I have an Adventure 48, first Hourman, Adventure 61 is first Starman. I have all 3 of those in universal grade. I have first Sandman appearance, which is New York World's Fair, 1939. Of course, Marvel Family #1, 7.0. I have a Captain Marvel #1. I'd love to get a Wiz one, but these are one. Oh yeah, there you go. Is that the
reprint?
Reprint. Yeah. So I have a 6.5 of that bad boy.
And that's the
first blonde Superman, right?
Blonde Superman, right?
Yep. And first
on
Sandman.
top of Sandman down here and blonde Superman and Zatara, I think it was. So
yeah. Hey, I love that early DC stuff. It's hard to find. One of my favorite characters from the 90s, though, that's not independent is the Shade, which actually appeared in the Stargirl show. But he was he became like an anti-hero, and I think it's the James Robinson run of Starman. I hope I'm getting that right. But it's the Starman who is like the Jack Knight. He wears like goggles and stuff. He's the first one with the cosmic rod. So there's this cool Starman series in the 90s that DC did. And it introduces the Shade, which is sort of like this, almost like an anti-hero that's extremely powerful. Like if he was a mutant, he'd be like, what do they call him? Omega level mutant. Like he's super powerful, right? But he's not quite bad. He's not quite good. He's kind of like a Black Adam-like character. And he's kind of there to help
Changing Man or something? The Changing Man? Is that what it's called? Shade? The Changing Man or something? Is that the full title?
Yeah.
Okay, I know which one you're talking about. Yep.
He's really cool. So I've always really liked characters like that. But yeah, it's funny as my taste in comics has changed a little bit. Like I tried to get into the IDW TMNT run, and I don't know, it just didn't quite get me like the original series did when I was younger. And I don't know if that's just something about getting older and like our taste changing, but it's funny how that kind of changes over time.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this again also last week. It's the evolution, right? I mean, as collectors, like we all evolve, and I kind of think our evolution also narrows, right? Versus when you start, you're like, what do I want? I want it all. And then like over time you evolve and you narrow and you get more specific. And I think that's just natural.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but like I've become, and I don't go to a lot of shows. I go to some, but I've been able to, and I kind of talked about this like offline with you guys before we jumped on. I've been able to develop a relationship with one or two artists, that I really appreciate their work. Like, anyone who watches my channel knows I'm really big into, like I said, TMNT, but specifically I really like Usagi Yojimbo, and I like the Albedo Anthropomorphic series. So about 2 years ago, I got the chance to meet Steve Galacci, who is a artist that really started a lot of this independent anthropomorphic comic, artistry, that really, was, I think, the inspiration for a lot of stuff that came after that. But, I got to meet Steve and actually develop a little bit of a relationship with him. And that's been like the coolest thing.
When you say meet, is like the first meet, like you met him at a show and you like got something signed, or did you like actually like meet him in a setting where you guys like got to know each other?
So we met at a really small convention in Nevada, and he agreed to an interview. So I interviewed him, and that interview is on my channel. And then I offered to take him out to dinner, and then we ended up drinking at this bar, which, like, you can imagine, like, you meet somebody that you've like respected and like read their work for years, and you're drinking with them at the bar. It was like a surreal experience for me. And then, just as I become more of a collector, I'm sure at first he thought I was like some crazy collector, right? But I think a lot of these artists, they really appreciate when you're earnest and you really care about their stuff and the work that they do, because this is their life's work, and then now I get a chance every time I go to a show, we try to meet up and, just talk comics, talk what he's doing, and drink.
Does he live out your way?
Huh?
Does he live out your way? Like,
so
is he
he's
West
up
Coast?
in Seattle. Yeah, so he's up in Seattle. So I'm hoping to connect with him this summer at a convention.
I mean, it's not an easy drive down. Well, you're in California, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how far that drive is, but it isn't like he's down there that often. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. But for those of us who just go to a show and meet these creators, like a lot of them are so nice. They're so down to earth. Like I lived in Hawaii for a while, and it was called the Amazing Hawaii Convention. They put it on every year. I think in COVID they stopped it for a while. But just being able to like meet Kevin Eastman, for example, that would just blew my mind, right? Having the little chat with him was just so cool. It means more to me as I've gotten older to meet these creators than when I was younger and I was just consuming their material and felt like they were on a different planet, you know.
Mhm.
So
All right. Now, do you have any original artwork that's Eastman, Laird, anything like that?
I do, and if we're in my other office, I would show you. I'm actually at in this like guest room down in Napa, but I have original art from Gobbledygook 1 and 2,
Oh,
which
Oh,
really?
is
wow.
the first books
Goon.
made by Eastman and Laird.
Is that
Wow.
Goon? Is that
No,
what?
gobbledygook.
So the first image, so before TMNT was recognized as the first appearance of TMNT, in the old Overstreet guides, it used to say Gobbledygook 1 was TMNT's first appearance. And
'Cause
the
they had a
reason
preview
why
in
they
it?
said that is they're on the back cover.
Yeah, there's like
Is
a
that
preview.
is that the first appearance or no?
It's not considered the first appearance anymore because collectors say that's just an advertisement, but it's
Yeah.
basically the cover of TMNT #1 is on the back of Gobbledygook 1 and 2.
And
Gobbledygook, go
if
ahead.
you know, I was saying, if you have a TMNT 1 first print, the back inside cover, that's the big tell. It has the gobbledygook advertisement.
Ah, I learned something today. I did not know that.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
What's the
That
difference
because
in
like,
price
well, I mean,
between
because you have,
Gobbledygook?
gobbledygook is a very pricey book. Like that's a very rare. It's like I kind of consider that in the realm. It's like there's like Cerebus is like another one that's kind of in that genre. Like they're not cheap if you find them. They're not cheap. And I don't know about gobbledygook, but like Cerebus is like well renowned for having fakes.
Mhm.
And there's like a very slight detail that you can look up on Key Collector to know what it is. I don't know if that's the case with gobbledygook. But TMNT also obviously has a lot of forgeries as well.
Yeah.
So
Gobbledygooks are really interesting. So they were photocopied, so they weren't actually printed. So for a long time, CGC wouldn't touch them. They wouldn't even grade them. And so Eastman and Laird made only 50 copies of it. And it was the first comic they brought to a show up in Maine. They were trying to sell it. And pretty much a lot of what is, there's not a lot of story in it. A lot of them are just like artwork that they did. There is the original Fugitoid story, or at least part of it in there. But a lot of it is just like really cool artwork that they produced. But because they photocopied it, CGC couldn't authenticate it. But what changed is CGC decided if Kevin Eastman said that it was the original copy and they were in their presence of Kevin Eastman and the books, they would grade it. So I had my copies I bought from the kid whose parents rented the studio that was called Mirage Studios. And
look at that.
yeah, and the reason they called it Mirage Studios is because it was literally a room like this in a house. So it was a mirage. And so that's how they named their original studio. And that's, where I got these books. So it was the original owner. And then I went and submitted. Kevin Easton was doing a CGC signing. And I was like, oh, this is my chance. So I had already shown them the books before, and he confirmed that they were real. And so I sent them to CGC when he was there, and I was able to get mine graded.
Wow.
Nice.
Yeah.
So then is that did he sign him then too? Like, is it a yellow label?
He did. Yeah. He put it, luckily, I wanted him to put it just on the inside, but he wrote it on the side, but it looks fine because he did like a silver pen.
Yeah, I've seen how they did the side, like on some TMNT books. I've seen that as well.
Now, given that book came from the kid whose parents rented that out, shouldn't that have like almost like a Fantast, its own custom label for that? I mean, that'd be pretty cool.
Well, it's almost like its own pedigree, I guess you can call it. Like it wouldn't be a pedigree, but like when they or like they have like those books that say like Gaines file copy or like collection of Stanley's personal tailor is one you've seen. Like this could be another one of those.
That'd be pretty cool.
So he also had a TMNT 1. I don't know if he ever sold it, but it would be neat to get that copy from him too. But I have his letters. So if I did ever sell them, which is those are one of those books, like once you have them, it's like you can't ever part with them. You know, I at least have the documentation to show the pedigree of where they came from.
Does that photocopy book, the Gobbledygook, is it because actually, to be perfectly honest, I don't think I've actually ever seen one. I just I know of Gobbledygook. I only the knowledge I have of Gobbledygook is because of that fact that I shared about TMNT 1. So
Right,
I don't really know
50 copies of that.
Yeah, my question is it look similar? Like, have you ever seen the proof to TMNT 1? There's only 2 of them. Does it look kind of like that?
No.
No, it's better put together than the proof. You're talking about the proof that has the blank front cover. Is that what you're talking about?
I'm not sure. So we
It
interviewed.
looks like a script, right? It
Yeah,
looks like
yeah.
a script.
We interviewed Dinesh Shamdasani. He's one of the owners of one of the 2 copies, and it
Oh,
literally
cool.
looks like they just drew these things up and just stapled them together and was just this is our comic. Like they literally jerry rigged it together.
This doesn't look too bad. What is interesting is that it's smaller than a normal comic. I wish I had them with me. I'd show them to you. But they're on my Instagram page. I did post photos of them there, and they look weird in the CGC case because they only take up about 3/4 of it.
Yeah. The ones when you see they're smaller, they do look kind of funny for sure.
I don't know why CGC just can't make a smaller CGC case for that stuff.
I'm assuming there's just not enough volume of
well, they make
books.
They make the magazine ones that are bigger. Why not make a smaller one?
Well, I think it's the number of volume, right? Like they're grading thousands of magazines a month versus how many of these smaller books? It may be 50. I don't know. I'm just speculating here,
but figure if that's Gobbledygook number 1, the value of that book based on what they're going to charge you to grade it, it could get you better. You know
for sure. If they're taking a percentage of the FMV, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Jame, that makes me want to ask: are you a big grader then when it comes to your collection?
So I don't consider myself a great grader. Like I have been grading books off and on.
No. I mean, do you prefer to have your collection graded?
Oh, okay. Yes. The reason why is that I hate restoration. I hate brittle books.
That's why you're one TMNT and all that stuff has been copied, right? And there's and Golden Age have all been restored. So that makes 100% sense. Yep. 100%.
Yeah, and you're right. And that's what I was worried about. There are counterfeits of Gobbledygook. There's counterfeits of Cerebus. So I have a Cerebus 1 as well. Wow. All of these independent books were counterfeited. Yeah. And the idea of paying big money for one and then having it be crap just terrifies me. I mean, collector.
JP, have you looked at what the counterfeit tell is for the Cerebus by any chance?
There's something minor that I know of. But...
Yeah. Do you know what it is, Jamie? You know what I'm talking about?
I do know that there is something. I don't remember what it is.
Yeah, it's like there's a small bit of red. I want to say it's up by Cerebus's shoulder, but I can't. Don't quote me on that. But I'll look it up on Key Collector after we get off here. And it's if it's dots, it's real or it's fake, and if it's a solid, it's just so slight. So if you're buying a raw Cerebus on the internet and you just saw a picture, let's just say from here, it's very likely you would never be able to tell that. So no, that makes complete sense.
Yeah.
And think of something else too, though. We have, I'm sure you guys will follow Elite Comics, Grails, Diamond, whatever. I have never seen a Cerebus 1 for sale through them. I don't think I ever saw Usagi Ujimbo number 1. Is that what it is, or is it's called Albedo?
Albedo 2.
I've definitely seen that on Elite.
I don't remember seeing that one. Yeah. But there's so little of those books.
Yeah.
That I think that the story for Cerebus was a good story from what I understand for the first 100 so issues, and I think he went a little off the charts after that fact, but it was well written. Whereas I think the neatness of that is the rarity of it in my eyes. Came out when I was collecting and I missed it, so it's kind of it means more to me that I wish I would have bought it, but it's rare. I think that's, to me, that means more that rarity than something from the Silver Age. For I don't know why.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think I think both of those issues, Cerebus 1 and Albedo 2, I think the print run was around 2000 for both of them.
Wow.
So, and as independent publishers, who are just starting out, they, who knows what people would get these, they would read them, they would, they would toss them out. They weren't coming off the press in good condition. Like I think the highest graded Cerebus out there is a 9.4, and there's like one of them.
Yep.
Well,
think if you go to a show and you see a bunch of artists who aren't known, right, and they have their own comic and they give it to you, you're like, is this going to catch on? I mean, you don't like grade it and keep it really nice. You might read it and you're hoping it catches on, but that'll be 20 years down the road and you'll be like, oh shit, I have this book here that I got from that convention. Oh, it's what it's worth now. Like, you never know.
I got a box of books that I pick up at conventions for $1, $2, and they don't have bags and boards. You know what I mean? I'm just trying to support the local artist.
GP will buy them from you.
Yeah, I spec anything.
Yeah. Like I have this one that's like called Crazy Disco Chicken or something. I was like, this is clearly probably not going to be worth anything, but I want to support this person who's putting their lifeblood into Crazy Disco Chicken.
I usually steer away from the artist alley because I'd feel bad too and just start buying what they have. And sometimes they're like $20 a book. I'm like, whoa.
Well, they give you those eyes, you know what I mean? Those like those please buy my books.
I know.
I was just like, God damn it, here I go again. Okay, I'm gonna give me some money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jame, talk to us about your channel. Like, when did you start? What is, for those that may not watch your channel, like, what's it about? What's like the content you put out? Talk to us about that.
So I started the channel about 2 years ago. I have about 1,200 subscribers. I am not consistent about making comic media, and I think that's been the big bane for my channel. I started off doing unboxings. I have done some interviews, like I interviewed Steve Galacci, who I've mentioned. I actually got to interview Jason David Frank at one point because I bought some stuff from his personal collection before he passed away. I'm kind of a Power Rangers nerd on the side, so I have that. It's a total different thing, but so I've done interviews, I've done Q&As. Recently, I did those roasts that like I said, I had to take down because a few community members were really upset.
Boo those people.
I know, but I get it. I should have probably reached out and say, hey, I'm doing a roast. You guys fine? Because I've had people afterwards say, hey, roast me. And that's fine. But I don't want to go to a show and be blacklisted from some comic dealer.
No, I got you.
Something I posted where they have a book that I want. You know what I mean? I also do a lot of content on like CGC stuff. Like I've had really bad CGC karma. Like if you can like name some horrible thing that's happened like with a CGC book, it's happened to me. Like I'm talking hair in the case, chips in the case, cases that like I open the package and they just like burst open, right? Like you name it, I've had it. And I've lit into CGC on my channel and they have never responded to anything that I've
have they ever lost any of your books?
They have not lost any of my books. Oh, I need to knock on some wood because that is the last thing I want to happen. But everything else they damaged my books. Like I've had 9.8s come back with like corners about to fall off. And I'm like, that is not a 9.8 anymore. If you guys have like created a tear in the corner, stuff like that, just horrible, horrible stuff. But anyway,
it's this crapshoot with them sometimes. I've only graded like 5 or 6 books myself, but that's the part that worries me is what you may send in and what you may get back, and Newton rings,
Oh yeah.
And that's just a small thing that can happen. Newton rings, that's understood, but taking a 9.8 and having a tear on it, all that kind of stuff, like,
it's painful to see too. Like it was, and a lot of these are reholders. Like I got them in old cases. I'm like, I really want the new case. It has the clear plastic. And when it comes back with damage, it just breaks your heart because as a collector, that book is not a 9.8 anymore.
Yeah.
And I've tried to be honest. So there's no way I'm going to resell it, and not disclose what's happened.
And it's such a big difference between a 9.6 and a 9.8.
Oh yeah.
So And what do? They have insurance, right? They're taking care of all the people that got the reholder issue. But then when they damage a book, they're like, well, that's part of the process.
Well, that's the thing on the reholders. You got to sign that waiver that says opening this case could damage your book and we are not liable or whatever it says. And it's just like, the tool that seals the book, they should have a tool that then undoes it. Like for them, like obviously it could be a patented thing that it's
you
not out on
obviously
the market.
sign a waiver, or you understand whenever you're going for a surgery that anything can happen, right? This is not surgery or brain surgery. It's freaking taking a comic out of a plastic case. Like it should not. I mean, there are things that happen business-wise at liability, but that should be covered by their liability. Yeah. Not like, oops.
I mean, not to mention, like I've cracked CBC cases. I'm sure maybe you guys have. It's not that hard.
No.
If you figure if you're a business owner and you're whatever you're doing and you broke something that you're supposed to give a client, you just give them another one.
Yeah.
You don't just say sorry you signed a waiver like that. That's not good customer service. That should be fixed right away.
This is the thing. When there's no competition, you can make the rules.
And the biggest problem is that us collectors allow CBCS and CGC to have that big of a difference in regard to the cost.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. I feel like on certain books, like if you get into the golden age stuff, sometimes that price difference gets a little closer. But even then, a 1 point difference on a CBCS case, you're talking a much lower price in a lot of cases. What I've discovered with CGC, if you really want to make sure you get the best service from them, is that you got to send that expensive tier. I really feel like if you're not sending in like the high value tier, you're getting
economy service.
Yeah, you're getting economy service. You're getting the non-experienced graders. I feel like I've noticed a difference. So as much as I try not to have to send stuff in for initial grading, if I'm going to do it, I just bite the bullet and do either what's now the high value tier.
But if you're sending in something, what kind of value do you have to be sending in at to make that worthwhile?
Well, I mean, now $1,000 and up has to go walk through.
Yeah.
And
I think they're charging you, what is it, minimum 150?
It's minimum 150. It's minimum 150 and it's 4%.
Oh, see that 4% thing, that's a freaking killer. Can you imagine if you send in like an Action 1?
Well, that's the thing.
$40,000 bill.
That's the thing I think about, like, not that it's happened to me, but like, for example, there are two 9.0 Action 1 comics, 9.0s. One of those 9.0s was found in an attic in a house in West Virginia. And let's just say you're the person that uncovers an Action 1 like this, and you're like, oh, baby, but you're like, I need to grade this thing. And it's like, yeah, like you just said, you got stuck with a $50,000 bill. And it's just like, unless you want to sell it, you probably have to just keep it raw because of that reason.
Well, think about it. If you're on a game show and you win money, you got to pay taxes on what you won.
Yeah.
And you may not have the money, but like, if you can see, again, that's why the majority of people who win the lottery don't keep the money, because they don't know how to hold assets. So someone who finds that book that's not into it probably doesn't have the wherewithal to say, I'll spend the 50 grand because I can get 500. You know what I mean? But
the good thing, if you're the person that finds it and then will sell it, like Comic Connect, for example, they'll front the grading, the cleaning, the pressing, and then they'll just take it out of the sale price for you. So you don't have to front the money in that situation. My point was like, if you want to keep it, you're kind of screwed. It's kind of similar to like if you catch, the home run ball that sets a record. If you're going to hold on to it, you're kind of going to hit a tax bill pretty high.
Yeah, that's a good point, because you just found an attic for nothing. Now you got to spend $50,000 to grade it. So you would keep it raw too. It's going to be time to sell it, but find every opportunity to keep it in as pristine as you can. Put it in a safe, whatnot. So
100%.
Yep.
I'm sure it's happened too, where CGC has graded a book and then somebody can't pay the bill. Like, what happens in that case? Do they put it up for auction? Like, does CGC just hold on to the book? Like, I've never heard of what happens.
Well, I mean, they don't charge walkthrough until they've evaluated the book. So you get the invoice before you get the book back. And so I guess if you don't pay it, they don't return it, is my guess.
Wow. it's just wild to think about what they can do with that.
Which is interesting that you say that, because I've never thought about that. Like, they've probably scored some big hitters doing just that.
Yeah.
So the coolest thing that ever happened to me with CGC is I had purchased a Star Wars 1 35-cent variant.
Oh, man.
This was like 10 years ago. So I kind of had this brief period where I got back into collecting. And I bought it in 8.0 and it was like $2,000.
Oh, that book is way more now.
And it was loose. And I sent it to CGC and it came back as a 9.4.
Wow.
And they called me and they say, oh, congratulations, you owe us more money. Which is the coolest call to get from CGC, right? If you get a call from CGC, it's either we screwed up your book and we're going to give you credit, which is useless, or we're going to like charge you more. But in that case, it was actually cool because the book was probably worth like 10 or 15,000, like it right at that moment, but then had gone up. But that was, again, one of the comics that I had and sold because of college. But those are one of those ones I wish I would have kept.
Yeah. That's the thing too with the CGC, since we're on this topic, like they just recently, changed their pricing. Everyone's like, oh, they reduced prices. And one of the things that they were able to do with the like price reduction of the lower end stuff is prior to that, walkthrough tier had a cap on the max that they could charge you. When they lowered the price of everything else, they removed the cap without saying anything, and no one really said much about it. But like now, that's where you get screwed. Like, and then like, who knows? Like that could have made back all the money they lost in terms of reducing the prices.
Yeah. Well, you imagine if they're like, if somebody accidentally cracks a case and they say, oh, sorry, we got to regrade that. If it's an expensive book, you're talking major money.
It's also an interesting conflict of interest too, right? Because like they're essentially incentivized to give you a higher grade because therefore they can then take a higher cut.
I never understood the percentage, basis of their pricing. I always felt like it should be a flat fee regardless of the book. Like I feel like the most they should charge for any book shouldn't be more than $1,000 because I guarantee you they're not really treating that book much different if it's going through the walkthrough.
I think why. I mean, I agree there should be a cap. $1,000, my guess, is probably too low because it's got to cover the insurance if they do lose the book or something like that. So, I mean, I don't know insurance rates by any means, but like if they're losing an Action 1, like I don't know what an insurance policy on that. Like, I mean, think about it. Like when you go to the post office, if you bought $1,000 of insurance on a book that you were shipping to your friend that was worth $1,000, that's like, what is that, like $30? Right? So if we're shipping $1 million book, that's more than, that's a lot. So that, I mean, I've always associated that the cost that they give you is a function of the insurance value they have to provide for said book. That being said, I do agree with you. There should be a cap. And I want to say when they removed the cap previously was like, I want to say it was 5,000, but I don't remember.
But think about it. Even if you have insurance, like you're a health insurance, if you are a business, you have all your people are spread across some type of age group, and there's how it's determined. If you're buying like regular liability insurance for a business like a restaurant where they serve alcohol, there's different tiers of costs. So if you have less claims, you pay less money.
Yeah.
So CGC was better with the books
than
they should have, right? If they have all these mess ups, then they'll charge you more because they suck. But if they could be a little more careful, then they shouldn't have to charge more. I get the insurance part of it, but maybe if that showed them to be a better company, we could keep the cost down, right? Being efficient.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like if we really wanted to crack open of what CGC could do better, we'd be here for the next few hours, especially with Jame's experiences that she's hinted at.
Yep.
Well, let me tell you the craziest one I had recently. I bought a comic. I bought a Captain Marvel Jr. #4, which is a classic McAvoy cover. And the book was graded as CGC Universal 1.5. It had the wrong back cover. Swear to God, had been certified universal grade with the wrong freaking back cover.
So it married it a different cover back.
Yeah, and I knew it because I had another copy. And so I reach out to CGC and I said, hey, you guys, I have this book. It has the wrong back cover. What do you want me to do with it? And they're like, you can send it back to us. You don't have to, whatever. And I was like, well, are you going to compensate me if like you get it? Like I paid $300 for this. Like, what are you going to do? And they're like, nah. And I'm just like, you got to be kidding me. Like, you have a universal graded book out there that should be an incomplete book, right?
Or a green, right?
Yeah, or green, yeah, because it has the wrong back cover. And you're just okay with it floating around out there? Like, I know people collect screwed up CGC slabs, but like, so I had to pull it down and give it back to the seller because I was like, there's no way I'm going to sell this.
Yeah, I mean, for them, I mean, again, I'm not saying it's right, but there's clearly like some risk tolerance matrix they have where it's like one book, 1.5, right?
Well,
Versus like
same as Marlboro and cigarette companies that said until it hits us too hard, right? We'll just let it go because of what we know. Until that's one book, another book. Yeah. But that's the problem by only having one grading company. But there must be a huge barrier of entrance for doing this for other companies. Like we have CBCS, but people have just hated on them for so many years that you can't equalize the two of them, and no one else has showed up to, take over that second tier. I don't know why.
The closest one I've seen that seems to be fairly decent, and I'm sure people are going to crap on me for this, is this one out of Australia called Halo.
I've seen Halo. I've seen the case. I've not seen like anything of significance really graded in a, like maybe like an ASM 300 would be like the biggest book I've seen in a Halo case.
Yeah, I've got a few books in them, and I had to actually crack press and regrade, and they came back the same CGC grade. So
I know there's a lot of people that also there's a lot of people that also like that. Is it EGS because they have those like custom kind of colors and things like that, depending on what your book is and things like that.
Yeah, it's just tough. I've seen some real screwed up labels for EGS.
Yeah, I mean, I personally think all I've seen are pretty ugly, but to each their own. It's their book; they can do what they want. Jame, I wanted to swing back. You mentioned earlier you kind of have a top 10 you focus on a year. I'm very curious. What is your top 10 in 2024?
Well, I can name a few off there. So I would love to pick up a Mystery Men #1 again, which is a book that I owned when I was younger. It's one of the first Fox books, first appearance of the Golden Age Blue Beetle. My top book that I really want is a Whiz 2-1, which is first Captain Marvel or Shazam. As you guys have probably seen, I'm really into Captain Marvel on my channel. So, the big red cheese is somebody I really like, even though the last movie was not so good. Like I love everything Marvel family, and I would love a Whiz 2-1.
Real quick, is it Marvel? Is it Shazam, Captain Marvel, or Miracle Man? Like, there's this distinction between the two, but they are the same, correct? At some point, they were the same.
So that's a really interesting side conversation. So yeah, Miracle Man is like, I don't know how to describe Miracle Man, but yeah, Miracle Man is basically Captain Marvel / Shazam. But I'm trying to think who wrote that. Was it Alan Moore?
Yep.
Miracle Man was Alan Moore, yeah.
Yeah, and so that was a series I read, and I was riveted. And what's funny that you mentioned that is I had never been into Captain Marvel Shazam until I read Miracle Man. And the big bad in Miracle Man is the Captain Marvel Jr. equivalent. Remember, like that's who they're like, who really go to battle right at the end, which was just again blew my mind when I read it. And to me, like that was one of the first. Like I'll be honest, I'm like a dork. I actually will cry when I read certain comics. Like that was one of the comics. Like I actually think I cried when I was a kid when I was reading.
That's Miracle Man number 15, right?
Yeah, like there was something about like that last issue that just got me. You know what I mean? And there's certain comics like the Death of Superman. I freaking bawled with that one too. Yeah. Oh,
I don't think you were alone on bawling with Death of Superman. I think a lot of kids probably cried with that
I didn't bawl when he died. I didn't ball Death of Superman, but like the way this story is written, like this has more oomph than that. I mean, I guess the fact that he gave all Superman gave all to fight Doomsday, but like the way this went down, like this is like almost his kid, right? In a sense.
Yeah. Yes. It's
Yeah,
so
so it's
painful. Like
yeah,
that scene at the end, it's just like you feel it and he
yeah,
builds up to it. And there's like this psychological element in Miracle Man, right? Like is because there's like this idea is like, is this actually even happening? Right? Is this real? Right? And as somebody who works in like it's getting a little personal, but mental health, I always was kind of blown away by the different layers in Miracle Man. It's just really amazing writing. And it was then that I started having some interest in Captain Marvel and Black Adam and all of the Marvel family characters. But oh wow, you just got me so distracted.
sorry.
I didn't even remember what we were talking about because I'm like having
You're giving
flashbacks
top
to my
10.
Miracle Man.
You're talking about your top 10 for
You got about
2024.
3 into it, and then all of a sudden I detoured you.
You just blew me away there. Yeah, because that series I didn't even think about. That's one of the big ones for me when I was younger. So I have picked up a few issues off my top 10. Like I picked up Steve Galachi's first published work, which was Huzzah 1, which is a rare fanzine from 79. I picked up an Albedo Zero Yellow Table, which is only 50 copies printed, which is the prequel to the Albedo 1 and 2.
Where did you find that? 50 copies only. Where did you find that?
So I paid, I found it on eBay, the worst place to buy a comic.
Agreed.
A guy had beat me to it on Heritage. I didn't get a notification for some reason from Heritage. It was on my want list. And so one had sold and the guy doubled the price on eBay. And I was like, I really want this book. And I tried to whittle him down. He's like, no. And I was like, damn it. And I just pulled the trigger and bought it. But I paid like twice the amount that he bought it on Heritage. It just killed me.
Yeah, but it's hard to find. It's hard to find. It's just like
every time I buy a book like that, the seller goes, oh, you were meant to have this. I'm like, yeah, I was meant to have it because I just paid through my teeth for the damn thing,
Yep.
So but most of the books I have on my list now are also Golden Age. Like I have some big ones. Like I would love to own an All-American 16, which is the first Green Lantern. That would just be one of those books.
Of those like kind of like superhero, like the all-time superheroes, like isn't All-American 16 like the least like number of copies on the census? Like it's less than Action 1 and Detective 27, I know.
I think there's like, and I'd have to look again, but it's under 20.
Yeah, I was literally going to say that 16 is the number I've heard.
Yeah. And that's one of those books, this is the thing with like Golden Age, and this is, I guess I would impress this on young collectors, is that sometimes books will come your way and you have one shot, to get that book. And sometimes that'll make you pay more. But so this was around 2000, right when I was getting out of collecting for a while, and All-American 16 came up on Metropolis Comics.
Yeah,
for $6,500, and it was a 1.5 loose.
Wow.
And I almost bought it. And I'm kicking myself 23 years later for not buying that book.
Yeah.
You just never forget those misses.
Yep.
So in that light,
right.
With 16 copies on the census, let's just say that are Blue Label, you hate restoration. Would you sacrifice that hate for just to own a copy of one that's restored?
Probably not.
Probably not. Wow.
That's different than Alan.
No restored copies.
Alan would buy the restored copy.
I mean, there's a lot of people that would buy their in those kind of books, they would buy just to have, regardless of what the situation is.
This sounds weird. I would rather have an incomplete copy, which I typically don't buy either.
Is there a degree though? Like if it's missing 2 wraps versus it's missing it's one panel is cut out. Like is there a spectrum on that incomplete?
It's all a gray area for me because I typically don't go there. But I almost bought a coverless Wiz 2-1, for example, just because I wanted it. But I ended up I thought it was too expensive. I think the problem with the incomplete stuff, it's really hard to price.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, it's kind of like whatever people are willing to pay for it at that moment.
I mean, there was an Action 1, and I actually held it at Emerald City Comic Con. I have a picture with it. But it's an NG grade because it is technically coverless. However, the cover that's made for it, like that it's encased with, has pieces of the original cover, and part of the piece is the actual Superman from it. But anyway, so it's still an NG, but it sold for $184,000.
Yeah. There are people that are willing to buy these books. There's something for me, and it kind of goes back to that scene of me going into that comic shop when I was a kid and going to the wall and that smell. There's something about the history of the book. I want to see the history. Like when I see a Golden Age book that looks perfect and I know it's not a perfect book, it feels like that history has been washed away. And I think history is so important for us to see, whether it's the history on a comic, the aging, or otherwise. And to me, when I get like even having a low grade book like a 1.0 old book, it just feels good. You know, it could be a 5.0 or 1.0, but if it's old and it's valuable, it just still feels good to me.
I actually also think too, like you were talking about earlier about you love pre-code horror. I actually think some of those books look great in low grade because you got this like skull cover and it's got some tears on it. Like it kind of matches the theme and it looks great. I think like my favorite of that genre would be Punch 12, the skull cover. And like you could see some like 1.0s of that where it's kind of ripped up around the edges. It looks great in my opinion.
Yeah. The other Punch cover I like is that one where there's that guy with the test tubes and he's like melting people.
Yeah.
That cover is just crazy. I'm just like, wow.
Yeah.
I think, what is the other one? There's like an artist and he's getting murdered by all these like little miniature people or something. There's some crazy covers that they did. Like,
yeah,
I never find those books, even the like the remakes of the 90s. I never find those Crime Suspense or what's the other one? A crime weird. Was it crime horror
suspense stories?
Shock suspense. I never find those. Never ever. Not even the good covers. Just people.
I do feel like if you're gonna find a book at a garage sale, I do feel like it's much more likely you'll find a pre-code horror book versus like an AF-15 because like most people know who Spider-Man is, and so it's like that reduces the chances of finding a big Spider-Man book. But like some of these like random like slasher covers that are like if you're into comics, they're super famous and iconic, but some random Joe that just like has them in his attic is just like whatever that is.
And those were great covers. They were drawn well. Those the crime suspense, shock suspense. Wally Wood. I mean, who was the other big name who did Crime Suspense 22, the headshot, holding the head.
I'm blanking on who that.
Yeah, I know.
But I mean, they were well drawn.
Johnny Craig?
Could be. It's like Matt Baker and Schomburg from the Golden Age. I mean, they would still be well-known artists today if they started today with their type of drawing.
Yeah.
Like, in my opinion. So some of them were pretty well drawn. So hard to find though. Really hard to find.
Yeah. So I don't have a lot of comics with me. I have like one box of CGs, and I was just kind of picking through to see if I just the weird stuff you see in the Golden Age that you would never see today. So this is speaking of Captain Marvel, Marvel Adventures 26. This is the first Mr. Mind. So this is when you first like see the worm, right?
That's an awesome cover though, with the flag on and everything.
Yeah, it's a great cover, and again, it's not one you commonly see too much in grades that are higher than 3 or 4.0. But this is what blows you away. Like, so a character that Captain Marvel and Captain Marvel Jr. fought was Captain Nazi. Okay, so here you got Captain Nazi, but this is a card. Like, you could cut this out and like trade it, but like, who the hell would want to cut out Captain Nazi and like trade him? Like, it's just so messed up. But like it was the golden age, so like anything went, right?
Oh yeah.
I mean, that seemed very common.
Crazy,
Like Batman 1 and Superman 1 have the pinup on the back, and so you can get those copies that have the back cut off. Now that's not Captain Nazi, but
yeah.
yeah.
I suppose kids would say like, "Oh, we're battling" or something, but
Yeah,
still, like,
yeah.
why
Well, I
would
mean,
you do
we
that?
our
It
good
should be
buddy
Spy
Mr.
Snatcher.
Akins, he talked about when he was a kid, he used to cut up his brother's comics and make like basically like stand them up, like put stands and fight and things like that. So there you go. That's why kids cut it out. And I did look up, by the way, it is Johnny Craig as Crime Defense 22.
Johnny Craig.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Jame, this has been an awesome time just chatting with you, and really thank you for coming on.
Thank
As we
you.
wrap up here, why don't you tell people where to find you, social media, YouTube, all that good stuff.
Thanks. So you can find me on YouTube or Instagram at Dragon Ink Comics. I just posted a video about just comic collecting recently. I'm hoping to post more content. Again, I'm going to try to be a little less risque. I don't want to hurt people's feelings out there. I know people get butt hurt. I get it, but I don't want to, I want to be able to buy comics from people.
Just make fun of Rohan. He doesn't mind it.
Yeah, make fun of me. That's fine. That's totally fine. Okay. I did want to ask, what's the Dragon Ink? What's the situation there?
So I published a few books, fantasy novels, and I've always been obsessed with dragons, so it's all fantasy related. So Dragon Ink Publications was my little company I started for my books, and so I just kind of modified it for comics.
So there you go. Love it. Yeah. Love it. Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks again for coming on. This has been awesome. We'd love to have you on again down the future to catch up and see how things are going and see how far in your top 10 you've gotten, or if you're on to the next top 10, all that good stuff.
Will do. Thank you guys. I really appreciate you having me.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks for having on. Make sure everybody you like, comment. I want to see the comments, and I'll subscribe. So we'll see you on the next unboxing, interview, or attic finds. Peace out, everybody.
Later.